So I'm just going to quickly have a bit of a discussion about us forming a technology enhanced learning and teaching special interest group at the University of Greenwich with an aim of supporting sustainable innovation and knowledge management. So my name's Kailey. I am a university learning technologist at University of Greenwich. And because we've only got a very short lightning talk, I'm going to pass straight over to my colleague Kendall to give us a little bit of background, which will act to introduce us as well.
Welcome everyone. So as I was saying, my name's Dr. Kendall Jarrett. I was formerly part of the University of Greenwich Digital Pedagogies team, and with my colleague Jimmy Lowe, who's a University Learning Technology technologist, and Kailey as well. So let's get into this. So we're going to be talking about the development of a TELT SIG. So very briefly, our background: we are a new team, and basically the university had invested significant resource in developing their digital strategy. And as part of that, there was a formation of a digital pedagogies team made up of the three faces you see in front of you. We had a vision to make teaching with technology at Greenwich stimulating and rewarding for all. That was our vision statement. We had a mission. So one of the ways in which we tried to do that was to empower colleagues to review, explore, and enhance their digital pedagogy practice. And the third layer of that, in terms of an action statement, was to contribute to the development of an institutional culture around informed digital pedagogy practice. And so we saw the need within that to develop a TELT SIG. So just very briefly, and we're going to be looking at the opportunities and challenges associated with what we're doing in a second, but our little function was in an academic team within a professional services directorate. We're very new, there's lots of moving parts at the university, and so we needed to sort of carve out a niche area in terms of making sure that we were doing everything we can to promote the sharing of innovative digital pedagogy practice across the university. And so that's a very brief background into who we are, what we were doing, and we're going to I'm going to pass on to Jimmy now, I think. Is it Jimmy or Kailey? I think it's Jimmy. Yeah, to look at the different opportunities that we saw in developing this TELT SIG in response to this need to match up pockets of great work that we sort of knew about, but ultimately in order to respond to the university's digital strategy and our vision, mission, and action statements. Over to you, Jimmy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kendall. So quickly talk about the opportunities that we had or we saw. As we pursue the digital strategy of the university, we try to subscribe to this one university principle. And we noticed that there were different silos of the departments and schools where the best practices, the innovations, the lessons learned were not really shared across the university. So we saw that as an opportunity. And of course, coming out of COVID, there were duplication of effort. Some of the lessons learned were not really discussed. So we had to sort of take stock of the things that we've learned, perhaps share across the university as well. There were those who are quite enthusiastic about technology in different faculties. Their innovation practices like simulation, gamification, digital assessment, there were great ideas that were not really spread across to other colleagues as well. So we saw that as an opportunity. Some of our messages were not really reaching everybody. So opportunity there for us to explore as well. Some of the technologies that were allowed but not supported, but nonetheless very innovative and very useful, were not really used for everyone. So we thought that could be a platform for us to share the best practices. But nevertheless, there were challenges, which Kailey will talk about on the next slide.
Yeah, so we thought that really the most useful thing for you to hear about is the challenges. So firstly, we knew there would be some settling in time. So we knew there would be some settling in time, particularly because we were a new team, but I suppose we didn't really factor in just how much settling in time we'd need, and the fact that the team that we were part of, the academic learning enhancement team, had been restructured into information and library services. So there was an appetite for change, and it was very tempting to sort of piggyback onto that momentum, but there was a real risk of it being lost. So we decided to sort of hold back and make sure that everything was as settled as it needed to be before we launched this. Secondly, secondly, there was also changes within faculties as well. So the level of management that really was our key links, there was some restructuring there as well. So we really needed to form those links first. Then as well, so there was a group or committee that had already existed called the VLE Lecture Capture Group that sort of ended up taking on multiple hats because it was kind of the only place to have that conversation. It was where those conversations were ending up going by chance. But that gave it sort of restrictions. So there were some people that weren't in that room that kind of should have been in that room if it was for that. And also it meant that it wasn't always the right people having those discussions, and it didn't really have anywhere to then take that. So we found that we needed to redesign that committee a little bit, formalize that, and formalize the boundaries. So we updated the terms of references and the membership with the aim to make sure that we really maintained the functional remit. So that's where Moodle updates were discussed and Turnitin scheduled downtime and things like that, and gave them a bit more influence in that part, and took away maybe some of the other hats it had ended up wearing, which actually we felt would open up the door to the SIG, would go, actually, this isn't where you can discuss that, but here is where you can discuss that. Fourth challenge was maybe a little bit of bureaucracy. So within the new team, there were discussions of, how about we create a portfolio of special interest groups? Do we want to create a uniform format for those? So we sort of had to put a little bit of a pause and have that discussion as well. And there were pros and cons for wanting to have that develop naturally or develop that into a general format to make it easier for people to engage. And that brings us to communication as well. So a platform. We had a real struggle to work out a platform for communication. And I would say we're probably not there yet. So if you have any recommendations, please do pop that in the chat, or we can have a discussion about that. But we found particularly that whenever we mentioned Teams as something we're all used to, there was kind of a real there's a real Teams fatigue going on, and people are part of so many groups and teams. But then we were conscious that we didn't want to introduce new, more innovative methods of communicating and alienate people that could use the learning opportunities and the development opportunities of a SIG as well. And finally, I think Kendall already sort of mentioned, so he's no longer part of the team. And there's been quite a lot of transience and staff transience at the moment, I think, because change causes even more change and things sort of develop. So we've also had that challenge for us as well. So what we've learned at the moment, we've got one special interest group of that portfolio that I discussed set up, students as peers. I think one thing we can really take away from that is that it had an academic push. So there were a few academics that really wanted this set up and wanted to have that discussion and led that. So I think we really need to make sure that we bring that in and encourage that. With that SIG as well, they kick-started with a really topical subject, and then had the second part of the event to discuss how they wanted the SIG to run. So I think we're going to be following that method as well. Probably at the moment, ChatGPT is on everyone's lips, so I think that's probably where we're going to go, have an event discussing that, and then follow in with a discussion of how that SIG should form and exist. So yeah, as I said, one of the main things we found though is that it did take longer than we anticipated to set up. And we felt it was really important to make sure that we had that distinction between the formal places that already existed and create space for the SIG to be a more innovative, creative thing. Thank you so much. Has anyone got any questions?
I just like to ask one question, if that's okay. Do you feel you're actually getting to the point where you can actually fill in some of these sort of gaps of maybe share a bit of practice, that kind of thing that you mentioned earlier?
As I said, so we're hoping very, very soon to have this up and running, and I do think that this will plug some of those gaps. There are the discussions happening. They're just happening kind of smaller and within faculties, and also within pockets within faculties. So it's happening. It's just not really. There's nowhere for people to go to have that discussion. So I think we are on the verge of creating that space.
I think we've got an online question as well. Did you have any user experience research to steer the focus and actions for the SIG? E.g. sending out surveys and doing interviews, etc., to find the gaps?
We didn't get to that stage. We were faced with a certain amount of bureaucracy in terms of the setup of the SIG. I mean, we thought it was vitally important that a special interest group, a SIG, should be owned by its members and should be developed and run and structured around the needs and wants and desires of the membership. So we thought it very, very important that we canvassed informal support for it. Certainly had a range of discussions with. So we've got a Centre for Innovative Simulation, design, learning, and research. We have other colleagues with immense backgrounds and experience of digital pedagogy and online and distance learning, and so we certainly canvassed informally the need and desire to have such a group. And understood that their frustration that prior to this notion of a TELT SIG, the TELT discussions about innovation was very committee based, and so it was very exclusionary only to a certain few, and from that was a very top down cascading process of innovative practice, etc., and then typically got bogged down, as Kailey mentioned, in the and the managerial aspects of what we're doing in response to the digital strategy. So we needed this to develop organically, and that was one of our remits, that it was very much member and student led, and there were opportunities, for colleagues to invest in that space. Yeah, Kailey.
Yeah, so as we've sort of said, like the settling in time, so our communication methods out wider as part of the AIL team within a new directorate has meant that we haven't really had that opportunity as much as we wanted to. So we didn't want to risk only discussing and only sending out things and only getting responses to people that were really interested, the people that we had those discussions with all the time anyway, because they were already on our radar. So that's why we've decided to essentially do that research in the second part of our launch event. And we think that's probably the best way that we can get that information, and by pulling people in with the let's discuss ChatGPT and then saying, what do you want from this? How can we build this? But yeah, that's been our main thing that we've stalled on, to be honest. How do we understand what people want?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think I can sympathise entirely with that difficulty of actually making the progress that you think you want to make. So thank you. Any other questions, or shall we say thank you very much for that?